Welcome to our webinar. My name is Kristina Milne, and I'm an admissions counselor at the School of Professional Psychology at Forest Institute. We are a graduate school located in Springfield, Missouri, and we offer 5-degree programs. We have a doctorate in clinical psychology, a master's in clinical psychology, a master's in counseling psychology, a master's in applied behavioral analysis, and a master's in marriage and family therapy. Today we have licensed marital and family therapist and AAMFT approved supervisor, Dr. Kristina S. Brown, to discuss the role of social media in relationships. Dr. Brown is an associate professor and the director of the marriage and family therapy program at the School of Professional Psychology at Forest Institute. She earned her master's degree in marriage and family therapy from the University of San Diego and her doctorate in marriage and family therapy from Syracuse University. Here she is.
All right, good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending on where you're logging in from with us today. My name is Kristina Brown, and as Kristina introduced me, I'm the director of the Marriage and Family Therapy program here at the School of Professional Psychology at Forest Institute in Springfield, Missouri. And I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit today about technology in couple relationships, and specifically why Facebook is bad and sexting is good. I noticed that we have a couple people logged in, and I wanted to invite you to feel free to send us some questions as we go, and I'm happy to answer them along the way, and we will also be leaving some time at the end of the webinar to answer questions then. I want to first recognize that there are both positives and negatives to these two specific technologies, Facebook and sexting, and that there's also a lot of other technology out there, including Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat, but today we're just going to focus on Facebook and sexting, and we're going to talk specifically about why Facebook can be problematic for relationships and ways that sexting can be good for relationships. And I'm going to say this a couple times, but I do want to be specific about sexting in adult and consensual relationships, because that's really important, because we've all seen the news stories about sexting and watched it on TV shows, and I think Law and Order this past week actually had some sexting issues presented in their episodes. So definitely make sure that the sexting that I'm going to talk about today is in adult consensual relationships. All right, so let's first talk about why Facebook is bad, but I'm going to start with, let's see, we have some poll questions, and I'm going to ask for your patience with us as we try some of these out. This is our first webinar, my first webinar. I'm going to put our first poll question up there, and it says, I post my relationship status on Facebook, and though there's quite a few different other statuses, we just picked 5 pretty typical ones. The first is single. The second is in a relationship. The third is it's complicated. The fourth is in an open relationship and married. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to pick one of the statuses. All right, so it looks like we've got a couple votes. 2 for single. 1 status is in a relationship. Any other votes coming in? All right, so I'm going to turn off our poll. So it looks like the majority of our listeners today, or those of you tuned in, are single or in a relationship. But again, like I said earlier, there's lots of different relationship statuses on Facebook. Here's a pie chart that gives some examples. Single, in a relationship with a specific person. For those of you who are on Facebook, know that you can connect your relationship status specifically to another Facebook profile. There's also engaged and married. We had some, this pie chart is from hercampus.com, and they added in, I'm in a fake Facebook relationship with one of my friends, which is pretty typical of teenagers. They'll assign a best friend to be a sister or a brother or an aunt, and then there's also the option of I don't have my relationship status displayed on Facebook, and that's almost the largest piece of the pie there. A lot of individuals either decline to share that personal information on Facebook, or the person who they're in a relationship with is not on Facebook, so there isn't another profile to connect to. But thank you all for clicking in on that little poll. So I'm going to go back and talk to you a little bit about why you use Facebook. Is it personal? A lot of people will use Facebook as a professional way to tap into social media and use it to market a business. And then I want you to think about why, who you friend, what decisions and guidelines do you make around choices of who you friend in your relationships, and then how do you set your privacy settings. I know here, as the director of the Marriage and Family Therapy Program at Forest Institute, we talk a lot about having a Facebook page and how that can sometimes be problematic if you're a mental health professional. It's not uncommon for your clients to look you up on Facebook. In fact, I usually challenge my students in their very first day of their ethics class to Google themselves online to see what comes up. And every year there's a couple students who are a little surprised by the pictures and statuses and information that's coming through specifically about them on their Facebook page or their friends' Facebook pages. So I'm going to do another poll real quick. And I'm going to ask you, this is about if you are in a relationship, and it looked like 60% of our listeners today chose the relationship status, or if you've ever been in a relationship while you've been on Facebook. Tell me a little bit about your decisions on who you decide to friend. So have you, the first choice is friended someone your partner didn't want you to. The second choice is friended an ex. Third, we're going to get into a little bit why we're going to talk about Facebook can be bad for your relationships. Met a person who could be a potential affair or a reason for infidelity. Had an affair. Or here's another basic one, aired your relationship dirty laundry on Facebook. How many of you have checked a friend's status or checked your feed and seen arguments being played out on Facebook? So if you wouldn't mind polling in and see what kind of results we get around what some decision-making processes you have while on Facebook. You're also welcome to type in if you have any specific rules or guidelines that you've set up for yourself or your relationship on Facebook. Please feel free to type in your message. That's on the bottom left corner of the screen. All right, so it looks like from our little poll that the majority of you have been okay with the decision to friend an ex on Facebook. And I do the poll just to get some information about what's going on, but usually one of the things I want to ask a couple when they're in a relationship is what rules do they want to set for their own relationship? And if both people in that relationship have no problem with the other friending an ex, then it's not a problem for me as the therapist in the room. But the problem arises when one or both people in that relationship don't think it's okay to friend an ex. So though I'm going to ask you sort of what you think about Facebook as a mental health professional when I work with clients, it doesn't really matter what I think about privacy settings and rules and guidelines for friending. What matters is what my clients think. And that's really where I'm going to assess and talk to them. So by extension, for you and your relationship, it matters what you think and what rules you think should guide your relationship on Facebook. But it looks like from our little poll here that most of you are fine with friending an ex. And often I find people are fine with friending an ex until it's their partner who friends an ex. So definitely something to think about. I wanted to present a little bit of research, just a quote from Time magazine, who was citing the Chicago Tribune, saying that the Journal on Cyber Psychology and Behavior states that, quote, rather than enhancing communication between romantic partners, Facebook may be fueling wild flights of jealous investigation as users in relationships perceive hints of infidelity and then scramble to find evidence of a partner's unfaithful thoughts and behavior. So this is a really timely quote about what's going on in relationships today with Facebook. A lot of clients that I work with in my private practice bring in issues about Facebook, and we're going to talk about a couple of those specific issues that I've seen and for you to consider in your own relationships. So the first is, and I'm going to skip over the next slide because we looked at it earlier. But the first is time. So time definitely becomes an issue for relationships on Facebook. And that really talks about the time spent on Facebook. So if you think back to the days when you couldn't get Facebook on your cell phone, how much time were you spending at your desktop or with your laptop in your lap just cruising Facebook and creeping or stalking friends and checking out what they're doing? And that's definitely changed with Facebook being available on your phone. Most of you who have Facebook have the app on your phone, and I would challenge you to think about in any given day how often you actually take a look at what's going on your Facebook page. How addicted might you be? How much time are you spending on Facebook, either posting and sharing your own information or looking up and finding out what other people are doing? So definitely making sure that you're checking into that and monitoring your use. I often hear people complaining about time spent on video games or any other personal activities, and Facebook is right there up there with it, but we tend not to think of it as something that's addicting or something that we spend a lot of time on because it's become such a big part of our daily lives. But time is a really important thing to figure out in a relationship. Are you okay with your partner checking their Facebook status before their feet even hit the floor after they get out of bed? Do you mind if your girlfriend posts where you went to dinner, or do you want your husband to share what he got you for your 5th wedding anniversary? So really talking about time, and then also negotiating some boundaries about what you share on Facebook. I'm going to do one more Facebook poll, and this one I want to know about the things that you've posted on Facebook. What are some of the things that you've posted and then thought, oh, I should delete that Facebook status? And here are a couple reasons for you to choose from. The first one is because you posted something and you realized it would hurt my significant other if I left it up there. The second one, because you didn't want your mom to read it. So how many of us are Facebook friends with our mom and our aunts and our uncles or our grandparents, and you posted something and then had to think twice because of how public it was? What about drunk posting? That definitely happens. People have a few too many to drink. They pull out their cell phones at the bar and post things that they probably shouldn't and feel very different about the next morning. And then if you're like me, compulsively, I delete posts and re-edit them when I figure out I've misspelled a word. And then other. So let me know if you choose other reasons for deleting your Facebook status. I'm going to give you a couple seconds. So it looks like from our poll, we really have people who are deleting statuses because they didn't like what they posted, either because they'd had a little bit too much to drink or posted them inappropriately, or they misspelled a word. But we're going to talk a little bit about the first one, about hurting your significant other. So one of the things we talked about is having conflicts. So what about disagreements that happen on Facebook? I have very uncomfortable situations where I've often witnessed a disagreement on someone's homepage. It's back and forth between them and their partner, and it's really things that is not appropriate for the whole world to watch. There definitely can be some conflict about relationship status. So I think we're going out, but my partner doesn't and didn't really like the fact that I announced it to the whole world. So that's why usually there's the complicated status that you can choose. Then again, there's the conflict with couples on who do we friend. So we asked earlier about friending exes, and it seemed like our webinar attendees were okay with friending an ex. And so again, if that works for you in your relationship, then that's what's most important. It doesn't matter what the general rules are. And then there's some conflict about making new friends on Facebook. I'm a mom of 2 teenagers, and our rule for Facebook is they can only friend people they know in real life. So no virtual friendships, only real friends. And so that's a rule that I have as a parent. But for you and your relationship, you definitely want to negotiate. Is this a place to meet new people and make friends, whether they're romantic interests or not? Or is this a place just to connect with friends that you have in real life, or old friends from college or past workplaces or different places that you worked? Some other issues for relationships to negotiate about Facebook is passwords. Do you share your password with your partner? I talked a little bit already about Facebook fights and then airing dirty laundry. So what are the rules and what are the boundaries around what you post on Facebook and what you post about your relationship on Facebook? I had one client who, one of the partners, she loved Facebook, lived her life on Facebook, and her husband wasn't very interested, but he didn't really mind what she posted. But one day she had done him a really great favor, and part of doing the favor for her was she said, I want you to post on Facebook that I'm the greatest wife in the world. And so that was something he was fine to do with, because it was within the bounds of their relationship, and she wanted him to demonstrate how much he cared about her and how happy he was with her on Facebook. And that was something that worked for them as a couple. So let's talk about infidelity. And a big question is, does Facebook cause infidelity? And I think this question really goes along the same lines as pornography on the Facebook. Do people want to know, does the internet cause people to look at pornography? And there really isn't a causal relationship there. A good old saying is, guns don't kill people, people kill people. So Facebook doesn't make people have an affair. People have affairs. Just with the World Wide Web out there and with the internet, there's definitely accessibility is a big issue. Past relationships, old boyfriends, old girlfriends become more available to you while you're on Facebook, and Facebook doesn't cost anything. You can carry on an emotional or a mental relationship with someone else without any cost. It's also very anonymous. So we talked earlier about whether you can friend new friends or old friends. You can carry on a relationship with someone you've never met and don't ever have to leave ever have to meet for real in real life. One of the things I like to talk about is the 80-20 rule. A lot of couples, when they come in and they're unhappy with their relationship, they feel like they're missing something with their partner. And often when you talk to them about what they're missing, it usually ends up being about 20%. So if 100% perfect person, about 20% they're missing. And that 20% is what people usually go looking for when they're when they're having a difficult time coping with their relationship and they seek out an affair. But the sad truth is, and the reality is that you usually just end up with 20%. So typically I'll have a couple that comes in, or an individual that I'm working with, that has an affair and leaves their partner, and then they realize, boy, I had it pretty good with the person that I had. There was just this 20% I was unhappy with. And so that's why I think working in the field of mental health, it gives me the opportunity to really help couples nourish that 80% rather than go onto a place like Facebook and look for that 20%. Facebook is a big part of sort of the aftermath of infidelity. It's a definite ripe for rumors and information and passing on gossip, opening yourself up for the availability of having affairs. On my next slide, I'm going to talk to a little bit about cheating. There's some statistics. 20% of recent divorce filings in the UK cite Facebook as party to filing for divorce. And then also the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers cite more than 81% of divorce lawyers cite Facebook as a source of evidence in divorce proceedings. So if you are ending your relationship and you've told your partner that no, you didn't have an affair, but lo and behold, there's evidence on Facebook, this is a place where lawyers will definitely go for. This can definitely also help go and look for evidence against you in a court of law if it's a divorce, or if it just ends up being a pretty nasty breakup. Child custody issues can also come about on Facebook. I worked with a client who was really struggling and fighting for full-time custody with her kids, but she was pretty tired being a single mom and working a lot, and so she was using Facebook as a place to vent about how tired she was and how she didn't have any support. Well, her soon-to-be ex's divorce attorney very savvily looked up on Facebook and found some evidence against her about how she could be an unfit mother, and they ended up having shared legal custody. There's an interesting website called facebookcheating.com, and it really serves as a place for people to come and tell their stories about how their partner left them or they got divorced because of Facebook. So if you want some stories or get sucked into some blogs, definitely head over to facebookcheating.com. So there are, from an article on mademan.com, there's a list of 13 ways that Facebook can ruin your relationship. And we've talked a lot about this, but I'm just going to list them through. So you've got your relationship status. Is it true? Is it protective? A lot of people who are in a relationship feel like, if I'm married to you, I want you to put your status on Facebook and say that we're married, because in some ways that's akin to a wedding ring. It advertises to the Facebook community that you are in a relationship and not available. So unfortunate old photos can also definitely be an issue. That can happen in new relationships if there's old relationships with another significant other. Tagging bad pictures. It says her there because the worst thing I want is a picture that's unflattering of me out on Facebook. So that can definitely be a reason for ruining a relationship. Lack of online affection. I talked about the earlier story where the wife sort of lived on Facebook and wanted her husband to appreciate and value her in that community. Exes, so his or her exes coming in and being a part of it, or getting to watch and see what's going on with your life. Jealousy, general jealousy issues can happen. And then poking. On the side of most of your Facebook pages is a little thing where you can quote unquote poke someone, which is kind of akin to pulling someone's pigtails on the play yard when we were back in elementary school. So if you're getting poked from someone, you're not in a relationship, I don't know if your significant other is really going to appreciate that. We talked about time and time being an issue, and then becoming a fan of the wrong page. So if you are have some pretty strong beliefs about religion or politics, whatever that might be, and your partner posts or becomes a fan of a page that's in opposition to what you believe, that can definitely cause some problems. A lot of relationships, when we talked about sharing passwords, discovering each other's inboxes, getting some information that you've learned from each other's inbox that you really didn't want to know or didn't want your partner to be sharing about you. And then the last way is that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So again, I gave the example of someone declining and saying, no, I'm not in a relationship, but yet out on Facebook was a picture of them with another woman. So that can definitely be one way that Facebook can ruin your relationship. So it's just a funny picture. Facebook, you're doing it wrong. Thought you would enjoy that. So let's talk about some Facebook etiquette. So the first rule is that real life rules apply to your virtual life. So, I just talked about making your Facebook status say that you are in a relationship. If you feel pretty strongly about your partner wearing a wedding ring when they go out or go out without you, then that would be the same thing as asking them to post what their relationship status is on Facebook. So right into your relationship status is your wedding ring. So the third reason is, number 3 is don't go looking for trouble. You definitely want to also consider privacy. So there's a difference between posting on a friend's wall versus sending them a message. And then also we've talked a little bit throughout making sure that you are clearing with your partner if you're posting information about them. If I were to post, hey, my husband won $1 million, he might not appreciate the whole world knowing that all of a sudden he's a bank that people can come and borrow money from. And then definitely remembering that Facebook is not therapy. It's not even girls' night out. So it's not a place to air your dirty laundry, share what's going on. You definitely want to make sure to keep your posts on Facebook appropriate. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. I hope that helps a little bit. There is a positive side of Facebook. Like I said at the beginning, we're focusing today on the negative sides of Facebook, but I definitely want to share some of the positive. The first is that it's a great way to make a connection with your partner. If you see something funny or a joke or you want to share a video, it's something that you have in common and can share throughout the day. It's also a great way to share an activity. Hey, did you see what so-and-so posted? Or I learned about this event that's happening in my community. I think we should participate in it. So Facebook can provide an opportunity for connection with a couple. It's also a little bit about knowledge, sharing your thoughts, sharing your schedule, sharing your plans for the day. It's a great way for you to sort of check in with your partner and see what they're doing. All right, so let's move into sexting. And again, like I said earlier, there's good and bad for both, but today we're going to talk about why sexting is good for your relationship, and again, why it's good for adult consensual relationships. We've all seen the things on the news about teens and kids getting into trouble for sexting, so today we're going to talk about how sexting can be used in adult consensual relationships. So sexting is a word combo between sex and texting, and it's the act of sending sexually explicit messages or photos via the cell phone. And according to a recent, this year in 2013, study from the Pew Research Center, Centers on Internet and American Life, 91% of all Americans have a cell phone. All right, so I've got another poll up here. All right, so I'm going to put this poll up, and the question is, have you ever used your cell phone to? And the first choice is flirt. The second choice is send a suggestive message. The third is to send a love note. The fourth is to send revealing photos. And the fifth is to ask for a revealing photo. So if you take a minute and choose one of those options and let us see. All right, so I'll repeat those options again. Flirt, send a suggestive message, send a love note, send revealing photos, or ask for a revealing photo. So it looks like 100% of you have used your cell phone to flirt. So I'm going to turn off the voting right now. So flirting is definitely a great way to enhance your adult consensual relationship, but can sexting? So here's a little comic relief. It's a couple in bed and she's texting while being intimate with her partner. OMG, OMG, OMFG. And she's got the little cell phone in her hand. So is there good to sexting? There absolutely can. That's what we're talking about today. But first, I'm going to go to a quick little 30-second video that I find very entertaining to share with you about what you need to consider before you sext. All right, so that's what James Lipton says about sexting. Before you tweet or before you send a text, definitely give it a ponder. So make sure when you're sending a text message that you are making sure who you're sending it to and whether it's an appropriate text or sext to send to that person. Make sure that they are willing and open and available to receive that. We're going to move on to our next slide. So sexting can be a great fit because today's couple is often on the go, and most typically, as the stats show, 91% of us have a cell phone. So it's a great way for a couple to stay connected. Not only does it help them stay connected, but it definitely can help keep things spicy in the relationship. Sometimes sending love notes or flirtatious message or texts and pictures during the day can become a couple's naughty secret. It definitely can help a couple build some anticipation throughout the day for when they actually get to physically be together, and it also encourages some creativity in their relationship. So this was a funny picture that I found on the net, and the first message says, "What are you doing?" "Laying in my bed," was the response. "Naked?" "Yes." "Show me." "It's dark." "I don't care." And a picture of total darkness. So sexting can be anything, sending pictures. One, I remember exactly where my husband proposed to me. And so when I've had the opportunity to go back and visit, I try to send him a picture of that exact spot to remind him that I remember the day that he proposed to me over 20 years ago. So sexting, be creative. It doesn't have to be actual pictures of sexual things. It can be lots of romantic and love notes. But there are definitely some common rules that you want to follow when you're sexting. Again, adult consensual relationships, I can't really say that enough, but definitely also making sure you follow some of these rules. They're not Emily Post, but there's some sexting tips for adults by Erica Ventrini. There's a website down at the bottom there of our PowerPoint so that you can take a look at it. But some common sense rules should still apply when sexting. If you're reckless enough to send racy pictures of yourself to a stranger you met last week in a bar, don't be surprised if they fall into the wrong hands and fast. For those in a long-term relationship, however, here are some easy ways you can turn on your lover by text. So the first example is called Tonight Tonight. And again, that goes back to it doesn't have to be a dirty message. It can be some hints at a special night coming up that you've got planned for each other. It's a way to definitely build some anticipation for the time that you do get together. This is a great way for couples who are in a long distance or commuter relationship to stay connected. The second is to codify your love. So, for example, we all know what LOL means. How about if you and your partner create some of your own code words and text messages that you can use to let each other know that you're thinking of each other? Definitely make sure that you negotiate on those and you kind of know what each other is talking about. So if you send some message to your partner, that they know what you're saying. Also remember that less is more. You don't necessarily have to be explicit to let your partner know that you love them and that you're thinking about them. You can be creative and use different imagery. You can take some pictures. Some examples from Erica Ventrini are if you can take a picture of your earlobe or your shoulder or whatever it is that you love to be touched or kissed or feels exciting and romantic to you. The next example is to flirt freely. So remember that even the slightest suggestion of an upcoming romantic rendezvous can be something really pleasing to receive. If you're stuck in an all-day meeting and you get a little love note from your partner telling them they're looking forward to spending the evening with you, it might make that meeting go a little bit quicker. Sometimes text messages can be a great way to open up. There's that sense of sharing without feeling so pressured that you're right in front of the other person. And using the text message format could make you feel more comfortable to tell your partner things that you might feel funny saying out loud. Definitely keep it light. Let your imagination do the work. Text messages are a read on the go. Often we get a little notification that we've received a text and we just have the quick opportunity to check our phone. So make sure that it's quick and light and simple, and definitely something to put a smile on your partner's face. So like I talked about some of the good things about Facebook, I'm also going to talk about the bad things about sexting. So again, adult consensual relationships. But another thing is to make sure that sexting can definitely hurt someone. So 84%, after polled in a survey a few years ago by AT&T, 84% believe that they receive text message or have sent text messages that are sometimes misunderstood. So that's the difference between intent and impact. Sometimes we intend to say something or intend to make the receiver of our text message feel something, but they may receive it totally differently. 24% of respondents said that it's a really big turnoff when a text message doesn't get a response. So if I take a big chance and send a text message to my partner and they don't respond, all these insecurities and worries are probably going to pop up while I wait very impatiently. The side of technology today is that we've become a very impatient society. So 24% of us say it's a big turnoff when our text messages aren't responded to it. And this is even though 82% of us say we respond immediately. How many of us have been in our living room and left our phone in the kitchen and we hear that little beep going off that we just got a text message, and we get up and stop whatever we're doing just to go check our cell phone? So 82% of us, we say we respond immediately, which probably contributes to us being really unhappy when someone doesn't respond right away. 33% of us don't like it when we're on a date and our date answers their own cell phone, even though 44% of us say we will answer the phone on a date. And so technology, even the presence of it and the availability of it, can cause problems in relationships. So this is just sort of the hurtful side of sexting and texting, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there are some dangers of sexting. Again, we all see the issues in teens and adolescents on the news, but often our motivation for engaging in text messaging can be problematic. 43% say they send a sex message because someone asked them to, while 40% say I did it to have fun. 21% say that they did it to impress someone, and 18% sent a sex message to feel good about themselves. So I think that's what's really important as we consider our intentions behind sending a sext. We definitely want to make sure that things are private, and we'd also want to think about legal issues. Sext messages have led to criminal charges including distribution and possession of child pornography, obscenity charges, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, harassment, or stalking. So definitely make sure that you are being intentional about your sex messages, and that you and your adult consensual partner have negotiated about how sexting is going to play a part in your relationship. So that really brings us to the end of my presentation, but I have one more poll. It's about the last 24 hours of your time that you've spent texting. So in the last 24 hours, have you sent a text similar to? The first one is thinking of you. The second one is I love you. The third is I want you. The fourth is, hey, pick up some milk on the way home. And the last choice is send me a pic, baby. So if you wouldn't mind picking which ones, if you think about the text you've sent in the last 24 hours, we'll take a look at what our listeners have done. So it looks like we're kind of evenly split over thinking of you, I love you, and pick up milk on the way home. And that's really representative of how a positive way that our cell phones can play in our relationships with our partners. Thinking of you and I love you are two great examples of sext messages to send to your partner to stay connected with them while you're at home or at work or even away from each other on a trip. And then pick up milk on the way home, that's just a great way to dole out roles and responsibilities in your relationship. I'm not afraid to do that for my husband all the time. When I forget to get things, I ask him to grab something on the way home. All right, so I'm going to close the polls on that, and I'm My name again is Dr. Kristina Brown, and I'm the director of the Marriage and Family Therapy Program here at Forest Institute in Springfield, Missouri. And I've just talked a little bit about the dangers or why Facebook is bad for your relationship and sexting can be good. And we have a couple minutes. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer questions both about Facebook and sexting, as well as our marriage and family therapy programs here at Forest. We have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, and we also have a postgraduate degree certificate in marriage and family therapy. So if you're someone who has a master's degree already, we have opportunity for both of you. So it looks like we have a question. The first one is, how long does it take to become a marriage therapist? Well, our program, our two different options, our first is our master's, is a 2-year full-time program. And then we also offer our postgraduate degree certificate. So if you have a master's degree in counseling or social work and you're interested in expanding your expertise and your clients that you see, that program can take anywhere from 1 year full-time to 2 years half-time. And then after you've completed your degree, here in the state of Missouri, it's a minimum of a 2-year process to go from being a provisionally licensed marriage and family therapist to a licensed marriage and family therapist. So good question. Thank you. All right, good question. So the next question I have is, how often do you deal with Facebook or sexting issues in your professional practice? Great question. So I've been a marriage and family therapist for over 15 years, and in the last few years I've definitely seen an increase of Facebook, more so than sexting. Sexting, I'll see a lot of issues with teens and adolescents, not so much with adults in relationships, but Facebook has definitely become a problem with a lot of the couples that I work with, and those problems range from a partner spending too much time on Facebook to partners finding an old flame, an old romance, or even meeting someone new that they then engage in an affair with. And sometimes that affair can be an online affair where they never actually meet in person, or that affair can lead to a real life affair in person where the people get together. So I do see Facebook issues in my practice and not a lot of sexting issues with couples, but sexting is something that I definitely recommend to couples. Often if I have couples who come to see me and they both work full time or they've got kids, that sexting is a great way for them to connect throughout the day and remind each other how important they are as partners. So not a lot of sexting issues, but Facebook is definitely prevalent, highly prevalent in my private practice here in Springfield, Missouri. So we have another question. Can you also see individual clients as a marriage and family therapist? That's a great question. I get a lot of people who assume that just because I have a specialty in working with couples and families, that those are the only clients that I can see in my practice. I am equally qualified to work with individuals, couples, families, and children. My training has prepared me for that, to do that, as we train our students here at the MFT program at Forest Institute. If I reflect back on my practice over the past 15 years, I would say that about 50% of my client caseload is typically individuals, and the other 50% is couples and families. But typically those individuals will present to me for issues like parenting or infidelity. Either they've cheated or they've been cheated on, or other types of relationship issues. So my specialty, of course, is in the area of relationships. So if an individual presents to me for something that I don't have an expertise in, then I definitely refer. But yes, I do see individual clients in my practice. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions about the presentation. If you would like to ask some questions from Kristina, our admissions counselor, she's also still available and can ask her those questions. We just had another question pop up. It is, do you think that quote unquote too much time online has replaced couples' problems from bygone years, like the husband spending too much time at the bar or in the basement? Great question. I do. I think that definitely husbands spending too much time at the bar or in the basement still come up, but the issue online is definitely much more prevalent. violent. Typically that's about video games. So I have a lot of couples who've come in to see me because of games like World of Warcraft. We tend to call them our WoW couples because they end up coming in for therapy because one spends too much time online. But those can be individuals who play D&D or League of Legends, or even if it's bowling on the Wii. It's definitely sort of that technology pull that's pulling couples apart, and more so than them leaving the home and spending time away. But great question. So that would be another place for a couple to negotiate if they felt their partner was spending too much time online, that they can set up some boundaries around their relationship about what's okay and what's not okay. Great question. All right, we've got about 10 more minutes, so any other questions? Ooh, we got another one. What's your best advice for someone wanting to become a marriage and family therapist or attend grad school? Well, as a marriage and family therapist, and I both have my master's and my doctorate in MFT, my first recommendation would be to aim for going to graduate school, getting your master's degree in marriage and family therapy. But there's definitely some ways to make sure that you're most competitive for that process. So if you're in college or you're in high school, I would definitely encourage you to start talking to people who are in the field. Find an MFT that you want to ask some questions. If you'd like to email me, you're welcome to do that. My name again is Dr. Kristina Brown, and my email is kbrown, KBROWN, @forest.edu, and I'd be happy to answer your questions about marriage and family therapy. And definitely you want to talk to people who are doing what you want to do and ask them how they got there. If you're already in college and thinking about grad school, you definitely want to make sure that you're doing well in your classes. We do have some pretty rigorous standards, including your GPA, how you did on your analytical writing as part of your GPA, as well as as your GRE, the analytical writing, as well as your GRE score. Those are things that we look at. But we also want to know what your letters of reference think, and we want to see what you write in your essay. I want to know that someone who's applying to my program knows what an MFT is and specifically has some reasons why they would have come to the field of MFT. Great question. All right, while we wait to see if there's any other questions, I'm just going to go back to the front so that you can see my name and where I'm located and my email address if you have any other questions about Facebook or sexting, or if you definitely are interested in coming to Forest Institute. Not only do we have our marriage and family therapy programs, but we have a doctorate in clinical psychology and 3 other master's program in clinical psychology, counseling psychology, and applied behavioral analysis, as well as certificate programs. We'd love to have you come and visit our school and check us out. All right, it looks like we don't have any other questions coming through, so I'm going to hand it off to Kristina so she can tell you a little bit about our next webinar coming up. Thank you very much for coming today, and I appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. We'll be hosting our next webinar on November 18th with Dr. Ginger Holzer, the director of our Master's in Counseling Psychology program at the School of Professional Psychology at Forest Institute. She is also a licensed sex therapist. She'll be discussing sexual myths and why students need sexuality education. So join us then. Please feel free to contact us at 1-800-424-7793 or www.forest.edu if you have any questions. Thank you for attending and have a great afternoon.